for joining us again. We are here with Don Lindsey and Penny, and we're going to be doing part 2 of his fossil presentation. So Don, tell us about what we're going to talk about today.
Today we're going to talk about more about megafauna. I found another box of fossils after the last presentation, so we're going to go over that in just a minute. Welcome back, everybody. I want to make sure I thank Miss Kathy and Miss Penny the Peacock again for letting me do this presentation. We're back at the Butler County Public Library. We're going to be talking about Kentucky Ice Age fossils. This is part 2. As you'll notice, the Butler County Cancer Assistance Program, they have ordered shirts. And if you need to order one, you can go to Main Street Collections and talk to Lisa, and you can order one. And as long as we're talking about cancer, I want to mention some of my friends at the Cancer Center at the Medical Center. Holly, Melanie, Debbie, Beth, Elizabeth, Teresa. There's just an amazing group of people that work at the Cancer Center, and I'm very appreciative of them. All right, we're going to finish up on megafauna. As I mentioned, I found another box of fossils that I knew I had. I wasn't quite sure where they were at, but I found them. We talked last week about how where a fossil is buried determines what the color is. And here's a perfect example right here. We have these are ends of a mammoth leg bone, and they're 2 totally different colors. This one was buried in an ancient muck pond. This one was buried in a pond, but there was a lot of limestone in this pond. That's why the color is so much different. We talked about the mastodon and the mammoth, and I'm not sure if I mentioned or not, but the mammoth was pretty much a grazer. This is the biting surface of the tooth. They ground up grass and ate it. The mastodon he could eat small twigs, branches, and eat them. So that's why his teeth are a little bit coarser than the mammoth. This is the other end of a leg bone. If you took this, and if I had the rest of the leg bone and this, it would be about this tall. It'd be about 5 feet tall. So I've got some other, here's just a piece of a rib bone, some other pieces of leg bone. This is actually part of a jaw, of the lower jaw from a mammoth. So that's, I wanted to make sure that I showed y'all this. And, well, I'm not gonna worry about that, Ivory. Okay, all right. I didn't really, you know, we talked about the ice ages, but I didn't really talk about why did we have an ice age? Actually several ice ages. It was because north of us, from north of the Ohio River all the way up to the Arctic, were glaciers, thousands and thousands of years ago. And here again, remember before I mentioned y'all about fact or opinion, okay? It's pretty much a fact that we had glaciers because we've got pictures like this right here. This picture came from Indiana. There's state parks all over Indiana, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, all the states north of us. This is where the glaciers ground out solid rock and put grooves in that solid rock. Now, my opinion is we didn't have any glaciers actually come into Kentucky, what we know as Kentucky today. The Ohio Valley was pretty much defined by where the glaciers stopped, okay? Now, when a glacier stops, it creates a moraine, which is a hill of debris that the glacier has been pushing in front of it. Now, most of the moraines over years on the other side of the Ohio River were eroded away into the river, all right? Now, if you go out west, you can still see some of the moraines from where the glaciers stopped out there. Okay, fact or opinion. All right, I believe most people would agree. Let me show you one of these horse teeth real quick. Most people would agree that this is a horse tooth, okay? But a lot of people would say, well, that's an awful big horse tooth. This is all you see. When you see a live horse, this is all that's sticking up above the jaw, okay? Now, so I think everybody would agree that that's a fact, that this is a horse tooth. If I told you that a saber-toothed cat killed this horse, what would that be? Would that be fact or opinion? That would be opinion, okay? So I want to make sure, and because I don't have a problem throwing my opinion out there. Anyone that knows me knows I don't have a problem with that, okay? Now, we talked about the buffalo, but one thing that I didn't talk about was the buffalo traces, okay? A buffalo trace came from the French. There was a lot of French fur trappers here 300 years ago. So they named a lot of the different sites around Kentucky and Ohio, Indiana, different places. A trace is where the buffalo would cross a river, okay? They would cross a river for 1,000 years and another 1,000 years. So they created gaps, and they might only cross there, you know, once or twice a year, but when you're talking about a herd of 2,000 or 5,000 or 10,000 buffalo crossing in the same area, that's going to create a pretty good trail. Boonesboro, Daniel Boone made the settlement of Boonesboro because there was a buffalo trace close by. When some of the early settlers were just moving into Kentucky, there were still some buffalo left. All right, we hadn't killed them all yet. Of course, there were still millions of buffalo out west. We ended up almost wiping those out too. All right. We talked about Big Bone Lick. There was a major buffalo crossing on the Ohio River close to Big Bone Lick. There's actually some of the bridges in the Cincinnati area are built on the foundations of those buffalo crossings. They crossed there so many times that they had the clay packed for 30 and 40 feet deep. So that made excellent foundations, okay? There was, we talked about Falls of the Ohio. There's a major crossing there, all right? Buffalo, any big herd of animals, especially buffalo, that they have to find water, they have to find fresh grass. After 1 or 2 days in an area, everything's gone. You know, they have to keep moving, okay? And they love a salt lick. And of course, we have salt licks all over Kentucky. So that's 3 of the things that they're looking for, and that's why they're always on the move, okay? Now, I'm gonna give you another opinion of mine. It's my opinion, if the buffalo would cross in a certain area for thousands and thousands of years, the mammoth and the mastodon probably crossed in that same area, because it was a low area. There was no big cliff. They didn't have to jump off a 200-foot cliff to get to the river. There was an easy place to cross the river. But here again, that's my opinion. The mammoth and the mastodon use those same crossings, okay? The mammoth and the mastodon, they needed water. They needed grass. You know, they were looking for the salt licks also. That's why we find their fossils at Big Bone Lick. That's why they found the mammoth here in Butler County 200 years ago by a salt lick right here in Butler County. All right. So I think that pretty much wraps up the megafauna and the glaciers. And we talked about the buffalo trace, okay? Okay, we're back. I had to move the board over a little bit. I've added a few pictures from what we had in part 1. Now, I told y'all, I'm pretty sure I told y'all before, we had horses here thousands and thousands of years ago. Most people, when they think about horses in North America, they've heard the story about the Spanish bringing the horse over here 400 years ago, which they did, okay? And they got away from them out in the west, and that's where the wild herds of horses came from. But thousands and thousands of years ago, we had wild horses all over North America. And they were North America, South America, they were up in the Canadian area. Now don't get freaked out by this picture. This was so long ago, we don't really have any idea exactly, what the horses' coats look like. But this is just a picture of a prehistoric horse. Here we have some peccaries, which is a type of a hog that used to live here. They still live out in the Texas area, okay? Of course, we still have the white-tailed deer here, but from what I've heard, I think in the early 1900s, they were wiped out of Butler County, and parts of Kentucky, but they were brought back later on in the 40s and the 50s. We had some llamas here. There's a little bit of debate on whether this was a llama or a camel. They did migrate down into South America, but all of them died out here in North America. And we talked about it before. We don't really know why the llamas disappeared. The peccaries disappeared from our area. The horses disappeared. We don't know why they disappeared from our area, but they did. It could be climate change. It could be the Native Americans. It could be disease. It could be a combination of all three. We don't really know. I did talk to y'all a little bit about the Glipton dot in part 1, and mainly because it's a very interesting animal. Everyone has seen, well, I say everyone, most of y'all have seen an armadillo, okay? An armadillo is about this big, all right? A Glipton dot was a giant armadillo that was this big. It was as big as a Volkswagen, and it had thousands and thousands of protective scoots, and this is one of the scoots right here, okay? Now, I told y'all in part 1 that the Glipton dot didn't make it to Kentucky. They have found his fossils in Tennessee, so that doesn't mean that he never lived here. It just means we haven't found any of his fossils yet, okay? Here's a horse jaw, and if you look real close, this was in about 20 different pieces when I found this, and I was lucky enough to be able to glue it. And as you can see, it's got all the teeth. This is the lower jaw of a horse. It's got all the teeth. Now the incisors are gone. This is what the incisors look like. There would have been 6 of these in the front part of the jaw. But I can tell you one thing. I was very excited the day that I found that. This is a horse's leg bone, okay? Now, I'm gonna do it. Let's see. Okay, I think you can hear that noise. All right, that's because this is stone now. This is fossilized. If it was just a regular bone, it would be make a dull sound. Okay, it wouldn't make that sharp sound. All right, and it's rare to find a whole piece of a leg bone. Okay, now this was his knee. This was so. You know how when they're running, how their legs work. This is the joint where the knee would be at. All right, we showed y'all. I showed y'all some horse teeth before. I want to show you a couple that I didn't show you. These are called uninterrupted horse teeth. What it means is, before these teeth ever broke the gum line, this horse died, okay? So those are a little bit rare. All right, the deer. Now the deer, of course, is still, we still have the deer in the area. But here's part of this is where it attaches to the skull. This is the baseline of the deer antler. And here's some more pieces of deer antler. And here's a deer tooth. Now these are just assorted small animal teeth. There's I don't know if you can even see that. That's a piece of a possum jaw. We had possums here thousands of years ago. And then there's a wolf tooth in here, and some other just assorted small animal teeth in here. Okay, this is an interesting creature right here. We had quite a few of these. This is a capybara. A capybara, they still exist in South America. They went extinct in North America, but they're basically a big rat. They're around 30 or 40 pounds. This is part of a jaw with a couple of the teeth in it. They're vegetarians. Anytime that you see smooth teeth like this right here, that tells you that animal is a vegetarian. Okay, we had, I mentioned that we had camels here. These are some camel teeth. And the interesting thing about this one, look how wore this tooth here is. So this tooth here came from an old camel. Now camels, the end of their leg bone splits at the end to allow them to get more separation when they're walking. That's why camels do so good in desert type conditions. Now, like I mentioned, these animals migrated to South America, but they all died out in North America. And these are just various bones from small animals. There's a rib bone. I told y'all I didn't pick up very many small fossils, but what would happen is, if I reached down, if I saw a horse tooth laying on the ground, and I reached down and picked it up, and then all of a sudden I saw something beside it that looked interesting, I'd pick it up, okay? I wouldn't just leave it laying there. And these are vertebrae from different small animals. There's a piece of a little turtle leg bone. Now, I did bring 2 big pieces of turtle. Now, these are actually sea turtles. I brought them just to show you. You see the curvature. This would have been around the edge of a sea turtle shell. I brought these because it was just easier to see them. And there's a spur at the end of his foot. He's got bone underneath his spurs. Here's a beaver incisor. Look out, I mean, you can still tell how sharp that incisor is for, you know, cutting wood. Okay, I showed you these fish bones in part 1. I've got some like that. I wouldn't have gone out of my way to pick them up, but some people collect what they call microfossils. Okay. Now, as far as I know, we didn't have any alligators here in Kentucky, but one of the first things that my Kentucky friends look for when they go to Florida is alligators. So that's why I brought these. This is a piece of jaw with some of the teeth still in it. Now this here tooth is a rare tooth right here, okay? Because I've found thousands of alligator teeth, and this is what you find. You find the top part. This part is almost always broken off because you can see how thin the root is. So as things get moved around, the root gets busted off. And here's another piece, okay? Now this here is interesting. The alligator has rows on his back that stick up. This is the bone that keeps that skin raised up to make those ridges on his back. And that's called a scoop. All right, this is a bird bone. Now this one a friend of mine gave me. This one's from California. Okay. Now, in part 3, part 3 is gonna be more about the geology of Kentucky. All right, and I've tried not to use a lot of big words in part 1 and part 2. In part 3, we're going to have to start using some big words, and I know the Cub Scouts are going to be watching part 3 because they can learn a lot in part 3 for their Earth Rocks patch. We're going to be talking about igneous rocks, metamorphic rocks, sedimentary rocks, This is actually a cast right here. I'll bring this over. This is a cast of a tree that lived here in Butler County a long, long time ago. All right, it's not there's a difference between petrified wood and what I call a cast. Okay, if this was petrified wood, you'd be able to see rings on the end here. You don't see no rings. So what happened is this tree got buried, and it was buried for a long time, and then the root rotted away, leaving a void, and that void was filled in by limestone, and that solidified, leaving us a perfect cast of that piece of wood. Okay, so we'll be talking about things like, and this has a long Latin name that starts with an S. I'm not even going to try to pronounce it. We will work on that in part 3. What is this? What kind of rock is that? Is it flint? Is it calcite? There's a test that we can do to figure out what kind it is. So that's some of the things that we're going to be doing in part 3. Here's another good example right here. We've got 2 geodes. They're about the same size. The problem is you don't know what's on the inside of this geode, but someone broke open this geode, so we know that this has got milky quartz inside of it. There's several different minerals that will mineralize inside of a geode. Okay, so that's another thing that we'll be talking about in part 3. Okay, all right. So the next time I see y'all, we'll be doing part 3, which will be more involved in the geology of Kentucky. Thank you very much.